I totally should have had one of my guitars up here so I could just act like I finished playing that. Oh, let me set this down. Yeah, I couldn't play that. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Hang Up. It's Wednesday evening here on the line. Let's talk. Let's talk about what's going on. I've got a couple of news items and then we'll dig in, but the phone lines are open right now and you're able to call in. Theist callers are going to have priority, as is always the case. 720-619-2288. There is one caller already on who is somebody who I told not to bother calling, but I guess we'll get to that once we get the news and my interactions with my guest done today. Couple bits of news. First of all, a Pennsylvania school district has settled a lawsuit against the Satanic Temple's Satan Club that they were doing at their school, that the school illegally just shut down, blocked the club from meeting on school facility. And now the school district, although let's be honest, it's probably not the school district, it's probably their insurers, are going to pay $200,000 to the Satanic Temple. A federal judge in May had granted a preliminary injunction. This settlement now finishes off this issue, and the Satanic Club, the After School Satanic Club, which is After School Satan Club, ASSC, which you could just describe as Ask. And they've already thought of all this. I'm sure this was just me as soon as somebody said it. I love that. It's the After School Satan Club, and if you just pronounce the acronym, it would be Ask. And so you could say, have questions about religion? Ask. Have questions about science? Ask. Want to do something fun after school? Ask. All of these things get you to the After School Satan Club, which has nothing to do with Satan, because the Satanic Temple doesn't believe in an actual Satan. It is a secular outlet that's focused on science education and fun games, puzzles, things like that, all the sorts of things that you would expect a club should be, absent religion and with no leaning towards a religion. There's absolutely no reason that any school should be opposed to this if it's allowing after school clubs at all. And yeah, they had to settle their lawsuit for $200,000. A couple other bits of news coming out today. Jimmy Carter's wife, Rosalind Carter, died on Sunday. And I think all flags are at half-mast until Friday. There was what may or may not be, I haven't seen updated details, may or may not be a terrorist attack at the Niagara Falls bridge from Canada into the U.S. The last I heard, and I didn't get to watch all the updates, there was conflicting news about a vehicle that crashed into the security area and exploded, traveled in at a high rate of speed. I believe they've said that there were 2 people in the vehicle and they're dead. I do not know if there's been confirmation that it was a terrorist attack at all. There was a report that they were looking for a second car. And then I also saw reports saying that there was no explosive device in there, that it was just the materials that they had that exploded. So I don't know. And even though such a thing doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense and may be incredibly difficult, there seems to be, we're waiting to see if there's results, there seems to be a temporary ceasefire in Gaza, specifically to get hostages released. So we'll see how that goes. In addition to the Satanic Temple lawsuit, there are a bunch of other legal issues that we're going to find around the world, around the country. And I happen to be very fortunate that, somebody you guys will know from past visits to the show, the litigator extraordinaire, Jeff Blackwell from American Atheist, is here to talk about what's going on, both from American Atheist point of view. It looks like Jeff's frozen. Nope, he's unfrozen.
It's back. Okay.
Hello. Jeff was completely frozen right when we needed to get him in here, and then boom, unfroze. It's exactly the right time. How you doing? I mean, I know how you're doing because you're literally down the hall from me.
Yep, I'm doing pretty well. I had forgotten about Texas winter weather. I'm not used to sweating at the end of the fall, but here I am.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it's actually really cold. Like I turned a heater on in the garage uh, because the lows for it's going to be almost freezing as the low temperature every night this week.
hmm, good to know.
It's just during the day that it's close to 50.
Well, it was in the 70s a couple days ago. Yeah.
Yeah, high today was 68, tomorrow's 57, Friday 66, Saturday 63, 57. But the lows are low 40s, and we're going to get a little under 40 probably by Sunday. So yeah,
This
all you people who live
is
where there's snow, are you jelly yet? Because it barely ever snows here, but boy, when it does, we had a blizzard a couple of years ago that nearly killed me. And it was partially because I had just gotten a puppy just days before the blizzard hit. And then I didn't lose power, but everybody else did. And I had a brand new puppy that was almost the death of me.
well. I'm glad you made it.
Me too. And I'm glad
And
you're down here.
this is Jeff and Matt's secular weather report at the
That's
top
right.
of the.
We're gonna take some calls in a little bit, but I want to go through some stuff with regard to American atheists, legal battles, legal successes, what's potentially coming up, and what people need to know. Because if you're out there and you're not currently supporting and getting news information from American atheists, you should definitely go to atheists plural.org. And you can get information there. And I believe there should be a way to sign up for newsletter information. But since Jeff's here, we're going to take calls in a little while. So I guess even though I may not be interested in that call, I guess we'll go to Christina first after this. But for the rest of you who are out there, as always, theist callers are going to get priority. All you need to be able to do is explain in some way that we can understand what you believe and why, so that we can then discuss whether or not we agree, whether or not we should agree, whether or not your belief is justified, whether or not um, uh, sorry, I just got a message. Whether or not your beliefs are justified, whether or not there's a good reason that other people other than you should share it. Jeff, tell us what has transpired in the last, I don't know, 6 months to a year with regard to American atheist legal cases and what you're looking forward to coming up.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I'll mention up front. I am litigation counsel for American Atheists. I oversee our lawsuits, amicus briefs, all sorts of things around the country. And just recently, as in yesterday, we officially settled our lawsuit against the West Virginia Division of Corrections and Rehabilitation over their implementation of a federally funded substance use program within their corrections department or division. Um, for a little background, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Justice, provides federal funding to states around the country to set up uh, separate units within their facilities to house inmates who are being treated for substance use disorders. It's
Right.
called the residential. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, right.
Oh, okay. It's called the Residential Substance Abuse Treatment Program, or RSAT. You'll hear me say RSAT a fair amount. What West Virginia did was essentially set up a program entirely based around the participants, the incarcerated individuals, completing a set number of 12-step meetings within the program. In order to complete the program, you had to attend at least 115 separate meetings. Also, each day started and ended with a devotional exercise. There were thoughts of the day that they would discuss every morning that were, broadly speaking, Christian, and never represented any other belief system. And we had a plaintiff, our client, Andrew Miller, who was serving a sentence for a B&E. And in order to get parole, in order to be eligible to get parole, he had to complete this program. And for those of you who don't know, a slew of federal appellate courts around the country have examined programs similar to this, basically state mandated participation in 12-step programs, and across the board have said these are religious in nature. You can't compel people to participate in them.
Right.
You certainly go ahead.
No, I was just saying right. I'll stop saying right because there's a slight delay and I know it's messing with you.
No problem.
I'm trying to be engaged in your wonderful description of what's going on. I will
and I appreciate it. If you have any questions you'd like me to address, absolutely jump in. I don't want to just ramble on forever, and I can go on about this case for quite a while. Anyway, the trial court in West Virginia found that yes, this program, like all of the others that have been examined, is religious exercise. The state cannot require you to do that, and so the requirement that he complete that program was removed from the list of requirements he had to meet in order to be eligible for parole. That also made him eligible for a separate kind of parole called the Nonviolent Offense Parole Program in West Virginia. And so once he set up a plan for where he was going to live once he was out, and that got finalized and approved, he was released. He was released, I believe, October 6th. And then we had to haggle with West Virginia a little bit over changes that needed to be made to the program so that this wouldn't happen again. And as of yesterday, the case has been settled and dismissed officially. So it's fantastic for Andrew. I was really pleased that we were able to get that win for him. But it really highlights a problem that we're seeing around the country. I've been contacted by, for instance, a parolee in Virginia, not West Virginia, in Virginia, whose parole officer was requiring him to attend 12-step meetings. He objected to that, and the parole officer said, well, give it a month, and we'll see how it goes. And that is not permissible. If he objects to the religious aspects of that program, the state can't require him to do it, even provisionally for a month. That parolee chose not to litigate that issue, and I completely understand why someone on parole might not want to rock the boat. But nonetheless, we are happy to take those kinds of cases. And in fact, we are actively investigating other programs around the country that have accepted money under this RSAT grant from DOJ to see if they are running things in a way that's proper, or running things like Virginia did, or like West Virginia did. Sorry, didn't mean to slander Virginia with that. But we're actively looking into this around the country, because despite over 20, nearly 30 years of federal appellate courts saying you can't do this, states are still doing it. We haven't heard a pronouncement on it from the Supreme Court yet. Who knows what this Supreme Court might decide? I would think that it's a pretty straightforward analysis, but I have disagreed with them vociferously very recently, so who knows? So that's the West Virginia case. I don't know if you want to discuss that in any more detail, Matt, or I can move on to the other things that we're doing.
Well, one of the questions I had about this was, you talked about another incident where somebody's parole officer had basically said, "Hey, give it a try."
Yeah.
I'm curious. This is a really perhaps overly nuanced legal point. If a parole officer is just encouraging their client, I guess, to give this a try, and the client still says no, okay, nobody's forced anybody to do anything, what's the legal issue of a parole officer saying, give it a try? Is it one of those things of like, because they're not saying, hey, you're going to be in trouble if you don't. it may actually be good advice to, if this doesn't bother you, go ahead and try and go along with it. But it also could be an absolutely, I could see it as an undue influence by, someone who's representing the state in some capacity.
Yeah. So I was sort of soft playing the parole officer's language there. They said, do it for a month and we'll revisit this. It was not a let's try it out kind of conversation about whether or not AA might work for them. It was, thank you for your objection, but you're going to do this for at least a month, and then we'll see if we can put you in a different mode. And that is absolutely not allowed. That is the state coercing an individual. I would argue, and I think there is precedent to back me up, that a parole officer who parolees are ordered to obey, if you disobey your parole officer, you go back. Where if a parole officer even kind of softly says, well, give it another month, and doesn't lay on the coercion in a really overt way, it's still something they have to do. Unless they, if the inmate says, no, really, I'm not comfortable with that, and the parole officer relents, then okay. But if someone objects and the parole officer prevails on them to go to AA or NA or whatever and the inmate or the parolee, goes along, then they have been coerced by their parole officer.
Right, because you're at risk of being in violation of your parole for not following the instructions of your parole officer.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we see this both in the carceral system. We see it also in people who are out on probation, out on parole. This happens all the time. Interestingly, and I should have mentioned this earlier, Governor Hochul in New York, is expected to veto a secular recovery bill that was passed last year by the state legislature and vetoed by her on, I think, December 26th, and then was passed again by the legislature this year. And again, we expect her, the governor's office has indicated that she'll veto it again. There is no reason to veto a bill that essentially says if you are sentencing an individual to any sort of recovery program, system, however you want to describe it, recovery therapy, you have to see if they object to religious programs, and if they do, provide them with a secular option. That is their right, whether or not the judge tells them about it or not. The fact that judges aren't telling people they're sentencing that they have that option just serves to violate rights that they already have. Nevertheless, Governor Hochul feels this isn't worth addressing. I can't fathom why, but here we are.
Did she give a reason for vetoing? Because she may have, but I can imagine a governor saying, no, this is already the law. We don't need a special thing for this. This is a waste. I could almost see somebody trying a veto along those lines. But quite often they just don't say anything.
Yeah. She, as far as I can recall, last year she did not issue a statement with the veto. She hasn't vetoed it yet this year. We just expect her to. So I can't say what her reasoning is this year. I will say that last year, the New York judiciary provided her with their analysis of the bill, and they were against it because it would essentially require resources to carry out. And that's it. If the judges are going to inform them of this right, pretty soon we're going to be informing people being sentenced of all their rights.
We're going to need apparently a budgeted line item for, hey, tell people their rights.
Oh no, wouldn't that be awful? And also, I think in a separate statement, she in I think press coverage, I could be wrong, it's been a year, she was quoted as saying essentially this is not a problem that she sees in New York. I'm not sure that she's looking very hard, but nonetheless, she's vetoed it and is about to do so again. Yeah.
And you had more cases stuff you wanted to go through.
Yes. So we filed amicus briefs in 2 cases before the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, this year. Those are both in cases involving government officials who block or otherwise silence people on their social media. For those who aren't aware, until late last year, we were pursuing a lawsuit against an Arkansas state senator for blocking people on Twitter and Facebook, and I believe deleting some of their comments to some of the posts he was putting up. So we have some degree of expertise in this area, and we wanted to give the Supreme Court our perspective on the issue, especially because I could get lost in the legal weeds here pretty easily, but the tests that federal appellate courts below the Supreme Court have used to determine whether or not an elected official, when blocking someone on social media, is acting in their capacity as a private individual managing their social media presence versus an elected official managing their social media presence. And it is important to maintain that distinction, because an elected official might have their personal Facebook page where they share, pet pictures and their kids' achievements and things like that with their friends and family, and that is entirely private. But as soon as you're, for instance, posting photos of you on the floor of the State House in support of some bill that's being considered, or if you say on the page and in interviews with non-social media, with news, that you regard it as part of your job to interact with your constituents. You say that a page is expressly provided for communication with your constituents, then you're acting as a government official. And the First Amendment attaches, which means you cannot block people because you don't like their views, because they're critical of you, anything like that. And unfortunately, the tests that the appellate courts have laid out are so detached from how people use social media that someone commenting on their elected official's ostensibly official Facebook page or Twitter account, Mastodon, any of the other new federated social media platforms, you have no way of knowing whether what you're posting, what you're saying to your government official, is protected by the First Amendment. Because, for example, in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which includes like Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, the Mid-Atlantic, basically, there was a case called Davison, and it laid out a 4-point test. Does the official hold out themselves on the page as an elected official? Is the contact information for their governmental office, or is it for their campaign office or something like that? That test, which is the most specific, still requires you to essentially do a holistic review as a private individual just wanting to comment on a Facebook post of that official's social media page and find out whether or not the posts more or less are ones that deal with their official work. And that is the most specific and objective test that any of the courts have utilized. Some of them are... Go ahead.
Anticipating potential questions on this, because I have questions.
Sure.
One people some people would think that right away, let's say I ran for public office and through some secular miracle was elected.
Mhm.
My current Twitter, I think what I would probably do is I would probably disable my current Twitter account and create an official Twitter account that I would then use as an elected official to communicate at least one directionally. Hey, I did this and did this. I'm not under any obligation, I would think, to respond to people who post there or anything else. This could just be, I could treat it like a bulletin board type thing.
Sure.
But if I didn't turn off my personal thing and like I listed myself as an elected official on my personal one and the public one, and had the personal one point to the public one, and then let's say the day I'm sworn in, I have a picture of me being sworn in, and I post that to both accounts, does that all of a sudden make my personal one uh because now I'm saying I'm an elected official and here's what's going on in there and everything else? Does that mean now I can't block people on that one as well? Because if so, I just turn off my personal one.
Potentially, yeah. It depends. Right now, it is impossible for me to say, based on what you told me, whether or not your personal account would be converted into an official government maintained social media page. I'll, for example, point to a case a couple of years ago that made its way to the Supreme Court, but became moot when Trump lost re-election. There was a case against him by a number of officials who blocked him from his Real Donald Trump Twitter account, which was his personal account before he became the president. However, once he became president, he started using it to announce new policies, essentially to carry out the job of the president. In some cases, I think people learned they had been fired by reading about it on his Twitter account. And the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which oversees New York and a few states around it, the Second Circuit said that he was acting in his official capacity when he was operating that account once he became president. And so there is certainly a way in which you can convert a private, an account that started as a private account into a government account. And that's why government officials should have to exercise some degree of care when they are managing their social media.
Sure.
A lot of the pushback that people get on this question is, well, there's half of the stuff is their pictures of their kids and personal things, and then the other half is work stuff. Are you really going to prevent them from blocking people from that page just because they post about their job there? And I would say they chose to post about their job to that particular account, and the burden here has to be on the elected official to keep these things distinct. We expect government officials, if you're, say, on a school board and are at a party, and it turns out, let's say, 6 other members of the school board are also at that party, and if that constitutes a quorum, you can't start talking about work because all of a sudden it's a public meeting. And we expect government officials to understand that. It's far easier to understand posting about work, post it on a separate Facebook page. They don't cost nothing. Just start one, post your work stuff there.
Yeah. It would also be the way that, it would absolutely make sense. By the way, we're going to jump to calls in a minute and we'll get back to cases in between stuff, but it just makes sense to me. I mean, I have a personal Twitter account. Well, everything I've got is personal right now, but assuming that I was ever elected to office, I would think that I would have some sort of social media manager that I would create new or have them just create the accounts that are my official accounts that they run and post. And, hey, get me to make a post there that they're going to do. It's not like I'm going to be spending, I'm not Trump. I'm not going to be spending my fucking day on Twitter. It's granted, we're assuming what office I might get elected to. Probably not going to be president, but if I'm ever president of the United States, I can guarantee you I'm going to have better shit to do with my day and more important stuff to do with my day than spend it on Twitter or
Yes,
X, which is what I'll never actually call it. But
likewise.
so
And yeah, so the issue for us is someone, when they're getting ready to comment on a post from their elected official, they should be able to tell in the moment, is what I'm writing or posting, commenting, retweeting, who knows, protected by the First Amendment. Right now, in order to know whether what you're saying is protected by the First Amendment, you have to essentially file a lawsuit and go through the often lengthy process of discovery to answer that basic fundamental question. And there's a long string of Supreme Court precedents that say, if the state has set up a regime, by the state I mean any government official, has set up a regime whereby it is vague whether or not the First Amendment applies, the tie goes to the person trying to speak. The tie doesn't go to the censor. If it's vague, it's the First Amendment applies because they made the decision they either made the decision or were too lazy and commingled their personal and their business stuff. Anybody who runs a business knows you've got to keep the business finances separate from your personal finances, or somebody might sue you. The fact that we don't expect our elected officials to have a fraction of that understanding of how to run how to work as a government official boggles my mind. And one last thing I'll mention is that the oral arguments in this case were the morning of Halloween. I was at the Supreme Court for the oral arguments. I managed to snag a first row seat, and I wish I hadn't, because through all of the arguments from the attorneys and all of the justices were entirely missing the point in these cases. It was astounding and infuriating, and I had to sit in the front row, still seething, because I don't want to gesticulate and draw attention to myself, distract you don't want to disrupt the court proceedings in any way.
can you imagine in the middle of all that for John Roberts to just, excuse me, Mr. Blackwell,
Exactly.
do you have something you'd like to say? Would you like to address the court?
Yes, I would.
As a matter of fact, let me fix what all these fuckers are saying. Thank you for noticing my jittering.
No, an intern or a law clerk or their security would have ushered me out at the moment I became even slightly disruptive. Also, if you make any sort of noise, it's recorded essentially for all posterity. So you got to worry about that too.
If they ever put me in the front row at the Supreme Court, I might have to make some sort of bodily noise just to go down in posterity.
There you go. Yeah.
My posterior can go down in posterity. But
absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll get back to a bunch of that stuff. I want to get to callers, because this is like all the other shows on the line. This is a call-in show. What's that you say? There are other shows on the line? Of course there are. I know. You guys thought this was just my little, it's the hang up and we're doing this, but no. There are lots of other shows. Normally on Thursdays with the Transatlantic Call-in Show, but tomorrow is Thanksgiving in the United States of America. And we here at the line are planning to give back a bit and give thanks to all of you who have been supportive. Any of you who you want to get out of the family room where somebody's telling the same story for the 18th time, where somebody's talking about how the devil keeps coming at them, or how, this new woke ideology is tearing us all up and everything's about gender and everything else. Well, you can tune in to right now. This is the plan. Who knows what the hell is going to happen between now and tomorrow. But starting at 2 p.m. tomorrow, there's supposed to be a Thanksgiving special event right here on the line. We'll get more details when we actually have them, which may mean that you'll get them at 2 p.m. tomorrow when we decide to go live. Sunday will be the Sunday show. And this Sunday, I am going to be joined by Forrest Valkai. Couldn't be more excited. I love doing shows with Jimmy, but how do you not want to get all of your other friends? If you get to do something like this and you don't get to get all your friends, all the people you like, all the people you're impressed with, all the people who know more about all this stuff than you do in on the show, what's the point? And so Sunday is going to be myself and Forrest Valkai. Monday will be a Skeptalk hosted by Aron Ra. Tuesday is Dying Out Loud with Dave Warnock. And next Wednesday is the Hang Up Arden birthday special. Now, this is literally the first I'm hearing of it, because Arden wrote that. But yes, I'm all in. It's absolutely the perfect right thing to do, because I think I even mentioned this at one point.
Yeah, we talked about this with Jimmy like a week ago, and he was like, "Oh, it'll be such a good idea. You should do that." And so, okay.
I just didn't when I say it's my first time hearing about it. On my little note from my producer, it is in all caps. Arden birthday special. And it's awesome because yes, next Wednesday is her birthday and we'll be doing a show together and having fun, and she'll be doing all the actual work because she's going to produce and talk and I just get to talk. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And tonight's call screeners, the apostate Paul. Thank you so much. And thanks to Cookies and Stephanie and Dylan and Morgan and everybody who's moderating in chat. By the way, for those of you in chat, if you've got something to say, it's really, really, really best for you just to pick up the phone, call in. If you're a theist who doesn't like the way things go, fine. I'm fine with that. We want to hear what you believe and why. It's not always going to go the way you think it's going to go. And sometimes it can go much, much better. And sometimes it can go much, much worse. So let's see how this goes, because we have a return caller who called in to Dying Out Loud yesterday and then left before we get to the call. Christina in
Hello?
Canada, pronouns are she, they. You claim that you have measurable evidence for God, right?
Yeah, well, I can get it. I am an oracle. I have a gift for prophecy. If you play with me, then I can give you gifts and truth. If you're willing to hear me, then you see if I lie, and I say that I can get you evidence that's measurable from God.
Okay. I have questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're an oracle and you can get measurable evidence from God. What is the nature of this evidence that you can get?
It's prophecy, so you have to hear the prophecy for you to be able to evaluate the prophecy.
Okay. And how long will it take to be able to verify that the prophecy did or didn't come through?
Oh, it will be apparent immediately.
Okay. So how's there
that
a prophecy? I mean, prophecy is about future events.
Yes.
Okay. So you're going to make a prophecy about
so it will be
event?
verifiable immediately, and it will continue to be more verifiable as time proceeds.
Okay. Oh, and so you're going to make a prophecy. It's going to be verifiable immediately.
Yes.
Let's assume for a second that it is verifiable immediately. How does that demonstrate that you're getting the information from God?
It doesn't. That definitely would not prove that I got the information from God. That would only prove that I was able to write a prophecy that started at the point where I gave you the prophecy.
Okay. So when you said that you had measurable evidence for God, that wasn't true.
Yes. The fact that if you then pay attention to the prophecy, at a later point, it would then give you evidence that the prophecy came from God. Just the starting point wouldn't, because you wouldn't be able to see it from the starting point.
So I could prophesize something that did not come from God, and have it come true. That doesn't mean it's from God.
I agree completely. I completely agree with that.
So
it's just that something is written in the prophecy that will make it apparent.
Okay. I'm not sure how that could possibly be true, but I haven't heard the prophecy.
Because I can't do it by my own hand. That's the case right there. There's something written in the prophecy that would be impossible for me to do by my own hand. So if I say the prophecy and it's not from God, then the prophecy won't come true.
Hang on. So you already know what the prophecy is?
I've seen big parts of it, little parts of it. There's a big giant master spell part to this prophecy. I have access to little bits of it that I can share with you now because it is way, way too long for me to get into all of it. I mean,
And you
wouldn't want to listen to it.
Yeah.
I've been an oracle for over a year. So, I mean, at what point the prophecy...
How do you know, how do you know you're an oracle?
God told me.
Okay, how do you know God told you?
We played a game where he told me, and I hallucinated it. I ended up in the hospital at that point because I seen his eyes, and it was very intense. But I hadn't. I will be very honest. I had not slept, ate, or at all. Or I just fasted and prayed for 7 days. So I mean, obviously, I was hallucinating. So we can't trust the hallucination that told me I was an oracle any more than you can trust any other concept for God.
I'm glad you recognize that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. No. I'm very, very okay. If my prophecy doesn't come true, that's cool. Then you just proved to me that I'm better off on my meds.
Well, so I just want to back up a bit because you said it'll come true and not by your hand, and that's how you know it was God. But I can make a prophecy right now that is guaranteed to come true tomorrow and not by my hand.
Yep. Agreed.
And it won't be because it was from God. It's because I said something that is sure to happen tomorrow. So
yes.
So I'm still struggling to connect.
Well,
I know because you'd have to examine the evidence and decide for yourself.
Christina, let's try this.
God's a hard concept to prove.
Christina, let's try this.
Yes.
I'm going to say go, and you start by giving me some piece of the prophecy so that we can begin to assess. Go.
Okay. Pay attention to the ridiculous things I say. Things like the burning bush once bound me to him for a rotation of the moon, because later on you'll see a different way that it was true. So from measurable evidence, from the hand of God, it takes magical energy. I don't control the cost in prophecy. I just find the spells and the symbols inside the veil or portal, and then I realistically copy the symbols.
Christina, I don't need you to describe or explain what you think is going on. I just need the first part of the prophecy. Okay.
The first part of the prophecy is that I stole the symbol for outside of insanity. Jesus told me to do it. He said that he would hide it from the Father, so I took ABC. I have...
Wait, I want to make sure I understand this. Hang on.
Yeah?
I want to make sure I understand this. You're saying the first part of the prophecy is that you stole the symbol for outside of insanity.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not a prophecy, nor does it make any sense.
I know, but in order for you to understand something later in the prophecy, that part is true for the prophecy.
No, Christina, I specifically said I need the first part of the prophecy, and what you said is not at all a prophecy.
Okay.
Can I just...
for the prophet? Yes.
Hang on. You said, so I took ABC. Is ABC a thing, or is it like
because that was the part of the prophecy that just happened right now?
What part of the prophecy just happened right now?
I just stole ABC.
What does stealing ABC mean?
It means that I did something that Jesus will forgive me for, and he'll hide it from God.
So ABC is a placeholder. It's like a blank. You're not...
Yes, it is. It is the symbol for outside of eternity.
Christina, right now, are you at home?
I'm sitting in the car.
You're sitting in your car. How could you possibly steal something while sitting in your car?
I had my handmaid do it.
Okay, goodbye. Let's go ahead and add Christina to the blocked caller list.
Yeah, she needs to go back on her meds.
Yeah, I don't get to actually make that determination.
Right, yeah.
But I would tend to agree. So here's the thing, I mean, between Jeff and myself, we desperately tried to cover all the bases. A prophecy is a prediction about some future event. It's not something that can be verified right now. And if your prophecy absolutely makes zero sense, like you're not even putting cogent sentences together. When you say you stole the symbol for outside of insanity, I would recommend that Christina perhaps seek some help to maybe get her meds adjusted or get on the right meds or whatever else. If in fact all this is serious, nobody should be mocking or making fun of. It is incredibly difficult, and none of us should be armchair diagnosing. But if you're unable to string together sentences that make sense, if you claim that you're going to be giving prophecies and what you say couldn't be considered prophecy by any reasonable person, if you couldn't stand up in a courtroom and argue for here's my prophecy and here's why it's a prophecy, it doesn't count. It needs to be some sort of prediction. It needs to be testable. And for clarity, when Christina called in yesterday, what she specifically said was that she had measurable evidence for God. There's not only nothing in what she said that was measurable evidence, there's nothing in anything she said that could have led to measurable evidence. And as she acknowledged when I pressed her on it, there was no way that even confirming her prophecy could in any way be considered evidence for God. And so you have someone who is either dishonest or confused, but in any case, it's a big old waste of our time.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating. We have more callers. Stanley in Texas, pronouns are he, him, has some sort of statement about doctrine of discovery. So welcome, Stanley. You're on with Jeff and Matt.
Hello, Chat and Matt. I'm sorry. What was the first name?
Jeff.
Jeff and Matt. Okay, I'm sorry. Hello, Jeff and
Hi, Stanley.
Matt. I'll tell you what, guys. I am so pleased that you are on the internet with just talking to people and expressing the doctrine of secular humanism and just atheism, and I'm so proud of you guys. I really am.
Well, thank you.
Now that I've built your ego up a little bit, I just wanted to talk to you about something that I don't know if you're aware of. It's something called the doctrine of discovery. And it's in a book called The Roots of White Supremacy.
The roots of, I'm sorry, you cut out.
I'm sorry?
The roots of what now?
The Roots of White Supremacy.
White supremacy. Okay.
The hidden roots. I'm sorry, it's the hidden roots of white supremacy and the path to a shared American future by Robert P. Jones. And this is the first time I've ever heard of this doctrine of discovery.
Is this about the doctrine of discovery that Christopher Columbus and others used to basically say we've come to a new land and it needs Christianity?
Exactly. It's not that they need Christianity, but that we had, I say we, I do not mean me or you. I mean the people at that time, the white Christians, had the right to change the life of any other person I think you've mentioned it that there's three ways that they can cause you to change. coercion. I don't remember all three of them. But this was done by this Pope after the first discovery of, we say discovery, the first intrusion by Europeans into the Western Hemisphere.
I just want to jump in here real quick and say there is no right that comes from a pope. That's not a right.
That is correct. What it is his I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Go ahead. Let's Matt ask a question.
No, this was his statement of what Christianity, but what Christ has to say about the path forward for Christians and what they can do.
And what was the statement?
Okay. Now I don't agree with this doctrine. Okay. I'm just telling you what this Pope put to the invaders from Europe. He gave them this papal decree, a permission for them to do whatever he had. There's a list, and you really need to. I can't give it to you on the phone here. You really need to look into it.
Stanley, what's the point?
Go ahead.
I don't know that I need to look into stuff from the fucking 15th century.
Okay. Well, now this, you're talking to Peterson, Jordan Peterson.
I remember speaking with Jordan Peterson. Yes. I don't know what that has to do with
Okay.
15th century either.
This goes into the way he thinks about the foundation of morality and everything else.
Even if it does,
his metaphysics.
Stanley, even if it does, even if a papal edict from Pope Nicholas V in 1452 goes into how Jordan Peterson thinks, why would I give a shit? I don't care how he thinks. I don't care. You do realize that not only is there massive war, all kinds of stuff going on with Supreme Court, lots of rights issues. Why should any of us give a shit at all about what a Pope did in 1452?
Because that is what what the Supreme Court and these Christian nationalists are operating from. I'm trying to give you the.
Stanley, I just want to jump in for a second here. I'll put my lawyer hat on.
Okay.
At no point would I ever rely on what one person says that another person thinks, or what is the motivation behind another person's thoughts, because I can get that from the person themselves, not from a third party. But
I understand.
I am skeptical, even if they said, well, I premise my worldview on the doctrine of discovery. I would highly suspect that they are not correct. That if someone were to come along and definitively prove that the Pope never said that, or something like that, that their worldview would not change. So
okay. I understand. I understand what you're saying.
To be fair, hang on, Stanley,
I'm not explaining myself well enough here.
Hang on.
Okay.
While this
Okay.
started in the 14th century, Thomas Jefferson referenced it. It's been in reference in a couple of Supreme Court states. The most recent was actually in March in City of Sheriff versus Oneida Indian Nation. It has a lot to do with basically indigenous peoples versus the United States.
Exactly.
Well, okay,
Exactly.
Stanley, don't you dare say exactly. I'm still wondering, why on earth are we talking about this on this show right now? What's the relevance? I don't need an interesting history lesson. I need relevance.
The relevance is that the Pope went through Canada recently, and he repudiated parts of this doctrine. They recently tried to, the weasel word, repudiate it again. This is just going into the attitudes of the way people have been trained in Christianity.
No.
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 Not,
No. You don't get to look at Christianity as a monolith about how people have been trained. You don't get to suggest that this is the cause of that, or this is the, that's not how any of this works. It doesn't matter to me what the Pope says ever, what the Pope tries to repudiate, or any of that other stuff. What is the fucking relevance of what you're talking about? Make this matter.
Okay. You just mentioned the fact that the Supreme Court is talking about it in their dealings with the indigenous people. Okay. It's just history, but it's relevant in the fact that the present day has not been it's not been brought out and repudiated and understood to be the
fallacy that it is.
What's that?
Understood to be the fallacy that it is?
Yes, exactly. Okay, I mean, the concept of what it states is so horrible. It still gives people who follow this religion and think about other people as being below them.
I'm done, Stanley. I'm completely done with your wide painting broad brush speculations. First of all, I was never a Catholic. I would never give a fuck what the Pope said. What the Pope says doesn't necessarily influence how other people view this. This was about European colonialism. This was about European expansion, where Europeans were giving rights to other Europeans to go take over other lands, in part to spread Christianity. That's not actually happening anymore. The United States take on the doctrine of discovery is when I say it was just mentioned in a case where RBG wrote the majority opinion. It wasn't referencing this and citing it as a good thing. It's not there. Christians who are advocating for Christian dominionism don't give a shit what the Pope has ever said, don't give a shit about the doctrine of discovery. They have a great commission from the fucking Bible to go ye therefore unto all the nations. The doctrine of discovery is irrelevant when you have a biblical command to preach the word of God to all nations.
Absolutely. That is
Absolutely.
what the
Jesus
Pope
fucking
told.
Christ.
What?
Nothing. I'll see you
I'm
later,
sorry?
Stanley. We're moving on, Stanley.
Could I possibly have a conversation through the email with you about this?
No. I mean, you can email me, but I'm not going to reply.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm just telling you, I have enough on my plate that having a discussion about this via email is never going to happen.
Okay. Would you possibly be willing to open that book up and look at it for just a minute? It's available on the cloud library in the library or for free.
What do you think's going on right now, Stanley? I'm in the middle of a show and you're asking me to go look up a book?
No, not right at the moment. Gee, sorry.
What on earth would I possibly need to look at the book for? I've already corrected your misunderstandings about the doctrine of discovery. What's the book going to add to this?
Well, I obviously am not expressing my understanding of the doctrine of discovery.
Yeah, but I'm reading the Wikipedia article on it and the references that come after it and looking at the Supreme Court cases. So I'm not relying on your understanding. As a matter of fact, what's frustrated me most is that when I pointed out why your understanding or why your explanation of it was completely irrelevant, you just say absolutely, as if I just fucking agreed with you. I didn't. I think this discussion is a waste of time.
I was agreeing with you.
You were agreeing with me when I was saying what you were saying was a waste of time.
Well, I didn't think you were saying it was a waste of time. I was agreeing with what you were saying.
I was.
But okay. But okay, I don't want to waste your time. I mean, if you got more important people to talk to than me,
it's not about more important people, Stanley. You might be genuinely the most important person. This topic, I don't see what's important about it, and I keep asking, and then I go and look up stuff. I don't find the topic valuable.
Okay. I was just thinking that when Jordan Peterson asked you a question about what was one of the horrible things that Christianity had done, Christianity laid the basis for the slavery and invasion of the Americas by the Europeans through this doctrine of discovery. I mean,
Stanley, I don't recall Jordan Peterson asking me to name things that Christianity had done that was harmful. But if he had, I could easily mention slavery because that's in the Bible. I could easily mention a number of things without ever knowing about or giving a shit about the discovery doctrine. You seem to have read a book, found something that you found new, and then decided to draw lines saying, aha, this is the reason they did what they did, when the reason they did what they did was the fucking Bible.
Yes, sir. It is the Bible. And all
why would you need anything else?
All this doctrine of discovery is this Pope putting the Bible out there for doggone it.
I don't know why we were going back to Jordan Peterson anyway. Jeff, do you have anything on this to add?
I just want to reiterate that obviously you find it the doctrine of discovery very important as a historical pronouncement from the Pope. It it's interesting, but at the same time, nothing you do regarding the doctrine of discovery, I think, will change anyone's mind from what they already believe. Which is why I don't know why it's worth talking about in the subject of religion and government and abuses by the government, which is where I come from, obviously, as a First Amendment attorney.
Well, I
don't think anybody will address any of the problems that we're facing.
Yeah, I see those problems being based from religion, from Christianity and Islam and all these, that the actual religion dictating to people, forming their having their minds formed in their youth to
Stanley, that's why I've spent the bulk of 20 years of my life dealing with this. It's one of the reasons why I get experts in this subject on to talk about Christian dominionism and all of this stuff.
And that's why I respect you so much. I mean, I'm sorry that I wasted your time. I just thought it was something that you might find interesting. To tell you the truth,
it's all right. This is something that I had briefly heard of in the past, but I don't see where there's any value in discussing this. It's not like nations are running around conquering other nations now and citing a Pope's message or missive about discovery doctrine. And when you say, oh, well, this was the reason that they did it in the past. Well, the reason that they did it in the past, we've discussed it in many other ways, was things like the divine right of kings, where the people just, for the same reason that you've got fighting going on in Gaza, except for a potential ceasefire right now, because different people think that God gave them land. Well, when people also think that God sent you out to convert all the heathens, then the best thing you can do is take over this land where you found a bunch of indigenous people. You don't need a discovery doctrine. It has nothing to do with discovery. The number of lies that Europeans have told each other in order to justify the very notion that they can own land and they can conquer land and they can sideline the people who are already on that land is staggering. But it's like, I'm in agreement that religion is a foundational problem to that, but I don't know why we would spend time talking about the discovery doctrine.
Okay, the reason I wanted to talk about it was because people like Coronado and the guy that made it through the Great Lakes to Duluth, they planted crosses. And when they planted a cross, this is our land. These are people that need to be changed into Christians, and we have this authorization to do so, back not given to us by a pope, but just told to us by a pope that's what Jesus wanted us to do. That's all. That's the doctrine of discovery, I think, right there. That
we're moving on. Thanks, Stanley.
I discovered you, and my religion says that I can do this.
I got it. We're moving on.
I know you.
Thanks, Stanley.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for listening to me, and y'all have a great, happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you and I love the fact you have your snakes and everything. I find that very fascinating.
Thanks, Stanley. I appreciate it. Whoops.
Happy Thanksgiving.
It's one of those things where there are a number of different factors that went into why people did the things they did or why they tried to justify it. I may be different from some other people. I mostly despise history and despise elements of history, particularly with regard to war and conquest. I hate fucking war movies. I am focused more on the future. And so it's interesting to know how we got here, but I already know that some people who thought that, they're going to use their, God's guarantee that you should go out and subdue the world and convert the heathen and all these other things. It didn't matter whether there was a doctrine for it or not. It already existed. That's how the things go. I want to know how we fix the world. And I don't think we can at all fix the world by sitting here going, back in 1452, there was a pope who said this, and it's been talked about a lot, including even just like a couple years ago. It was the doctrine was referenced in a court case. Yeah, it was referenced to shut it down, saying it does not apply, or that it doesn't apply here, or that it doesn't give, First Nations or Indigenous people some right to this, because every bit of that has been superseded by what, Jeff? What's the document that supersedes the United States' laws from back in 1452?
The Constitution and a bunch of state constitutions, international law, and
you don't need to come out with a statement repudiating 15th century doctrine if it's no longer consistent with the Constitution. And
I will say the one.
No, go for it.
The one area where not so much the 1400s, but the one area where history is relevant is when you start having to convince originalists in the courts that the Constitution means what it says.
How dare it mean what it says and not what I think it says, or not what I wish it says,
or what I thought people 250 years ago meant it to say.
We got more callers, and I generally give priority to theist callers. I'm going to say that includes deist callers. So Joel from Canada believes deism is correct and will argue it. So Joel, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Matt?
I'm alive.
That's good. Yeah. So I grew up Christian. And as I grew older, I kind of grew out of the tenets of Christianity. But I did hold on to the deism because I firmly believe that there's evidence for a creator of sorts, just in the human experience. And basically, I'm looking at the sense of truth as sort of the anchor for that. I don't know if you want to get into that, but I think truth is objective, and I think it's something we can sense. And because of that reason, I think a deity does exist.
Wait, you think truth is objective? It's something we can sense, and because of that, a deity exists?
Well, I think it's evidence for something like a deity, yes, like a creator.
How does X being true serve as evidence for a creator? And by the way, deistic creators are by definition unfalsifiable and untestable. There is no detecting of them.
Well, I think that's in order for us to perceive something and to truly know that it's true, there has to be truth outside of humanity. And if that's a part of the universe, then it's not something we can measure. So it's something that's unexplained in other ways other than in our own feeling, and we all have it. It seems to me that it was given to us.
I quibble with your contention that humans have an innate truth detector. There are so many things we were just talking about history, but there were so many things over the last, 10,000 years of recorded history that plenty of people thought were true that were completely wrong. Your intrinsic sense of truth might tell you the sun goes around the earth. It doesn't. That's just the first, most obvious example that jumped to mind. I
would challenge how you feel about, like, someone who in the olden times would have looked at the sun going around the earth and said, yeah, it's obvious that the sun goes around the earth. Why would we even bother to argue it? But if they had an epiphany about something, if they had just had a discovery in their own life about something personal, let's say an interrelational thing, that transcendent aha moment to them is tapping into some kind of a sense of truth that is more profound, and that we've all had those kind of experiences.
No, a sensation that you've discovered some truth is not truth. You could still be wrong. Truth is when we identify and verify that something is an accurate view of reality. So, but what you're saying is, like, let's say 2 + 3 = 5 in base 10. Is that statement true?
Yes.
Okay. What you said a minute ago is that the mere fact that we can know that that is true seems like it was given to us. And that's your reason for thinking there's a deistic God. How on earth does recognize what? No. You don't get to backtrack off of it with a especially when I'm still in mid-sentence. You said we can perceive something, we can know that it's true. If that's a part of the universe, that feeling that it's true, which isn't, I mean, the feeling is part of the universe, but whether or not the truth is a separate thing, then it's not something we can measure, and it seems it was given to us. I wrote it all down as you said it. If 2 + 3 = 5 in base 10 is true, how does the ability to identify that as true point to a God?
It's almost as if the universe is a simulation, and we, as discoverers of truth, are becoming closer to becoming deities ourselves.
Joel, are you going to answer my question, or are you going to deflect with some bullshit about it? It's almost like the universe is a simulation. If the statement 2 + 3 = 5 in base 10 is true, how does that point to a God go?
I'm not sure exactly.
You're the one that said this. This is your argument put forth plainly to you. And now you're not sure. And now you want to talk about how the universe feels like a simulation. I thought you were going to argue. For deism, which is already patently absurd, because deism is the proposition that there's a non-detectable, non-intervening God. And so that's already an untestable, unfalsifiable proposition. But if you're going to call in and say you're going to defend stuff, and I ask you questions about your actual proof, you don't get to then do an I don't know and try to talk about something else.
Well, I can tell you why I'm a deist. I mean,
I can tell you why you're a deist. I can tell you why you're a deist, because you don't understand what a valid and sound argument is, and you're operating off your suspicions and confusions. That's why you're a deist.
Well, or maybe we are all deities if we create simulations and AI that could discover us.
I won't say goodbye, because I think Jeff has questions, but
I don't have a question. I just, the fact that, sure, I have a sense of whether or not a given proposition is true or not. The fact that I have that sense is actually more evidence of. I mean, it's not clear to me that you're. What I was going to say was that's evidence to me that we evolved naturally through natural processes, not having been created by a creator and given a sense of truth. Because being able to discern on a basic sense whether everyday things are true or false. Is that a tiger in the grass? Or I guess that is a tiger in the grass, true or false, is a good thing evolutionarily to have a sense of. However, the fact that that sense is as often wrong as it is right, the more complex our society gets, is evidence to me that it was an evolved trait that benefited us, and those who had a sense of what's real and what's not survived better, and is not in any way an indicator to me that it was given by a deity.
Well, why does our society tend to evolve towards striving to be more good and true in a general sense? Like,
Our society doesn't strive. Our society doesn't strive to be more true. We have worked over years and years to develop technologies that make our lives easier. We have developed new philosophies and things like that to explain the world around us. And in that sense, we're trying to be more accurate with those systems.
I'm just trying to come to terms with why it is that we have these profound epiphanal moments and why they mean so much to us. And the fact that it was evolutionary designed that way, I guess it isn't enough for me. And I don't have, I can't get up on the blackboard and prove to you that a deity exists, but it just seems to me.
Why did you call in and say you could?
Well, yeah. In that case, I'm sorry, Matt, for wasting your time, but I'm just giving you my perspective there.
I'm just wondering why on earth you would call in and say that you're here ready to demonstrate the truth of a deity when you're not, and you know you're not.
Well, I guess I'm appealing to your own sense of truth, and I have
a very well-developed sense of truth. I have an amazing bullshit detector.
Oh, sure. So do I.
No, you don't.
But I don't
Your
know.
bullshit detector is horribly flawed. You are basically saying you think that we have an innate, pre-programmed desire to seek truth that probably came from a god. When you just failed to recognize that if you ran around being wrong about everything, you would fucking die. And when you're correct about things, you increase the likelihood that you're not going to die. What better reason would anybody need to care about the truth?
Okay, that's fine, but the most profound, most intense moments of your life aren't when you seek food. It's when you have these epiphanal, incredible moments.
You've never been hungry.
Only some of us
are lucky. I don't give a shit. It doesn't matter, Joel, how profound you find something. And if you were starving, finding food would be the most profound discovery you could make. You are thinking in the smallest possible terms, and you're like, well, evolution doesn't seem to explain it enough for me, so I'm going to say there's a God, and then I'm going to call in and say, I believe deism is correct, and we'll argue for it. You haven't given anything for deism being correct.
It's not even a deistic position.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all I got for you guys, so.
Okay.
Well,
if you come up with something else.
Thanks, Joel. Happy Thanksgiving.
It is that call, which I took copious notes on. Before the call started, I had questions. How is it that you're detecting the undetectable? Deistic gods don't intervene in reality in an indetectable way. And so if you think you found evidence for a god, you've already fundamentally misunderstood what deism is. And if you think you find evidence that points to a god, you've also fundamentally misunderstood what deism is. But maybe you're going to find some sort of evidence that points towards something that you might say could be a deistic god out there. Like, hey, it seems like the universe is incredibly unlikely to have come about without some sort of guiding intelligence. We can't detect it. We can't prove it, but I'm going to infer that guiding intelligence, and that's why I'm a deist. Okay. I think that that's an incredibly ridiculous way to reach a conclusion, because now what you're concluding is that between two propositions, there is some being that created the universe and there's not some being that created the universe. You're just going to lean one way because you don't find one of them particularly appealing. Well, I mean, now your argument for a deistic God is no different from why you like chocolate ice cream more than vanilla ice cream. But when you say, oh, it's all about truth. Okay, well, truth is that which comports with reality. At least that's the definition we're both using to agree here. And then you argue that the mere fact that we can identify truth points to God. It sounds like you listened to some Christian apologists and didn't understand what they were saying, because that's a common thing. Oh, it's a presuppositional thing. In order for your worldview to make any sense at all, Matt, you must borrow from our worldview. If there's not a God to be the guarantor of truth, then there is no truth. And there's no reason for us to care about truth. But that's absolutely ridiculous. As Jeff and I both pointed out, there are benefits to being correct, and there are risks to being wrong. That is enough of a reason for why evolution would impact our ability to detect truth, or our desire to detect truth, and the fact that we can still get it wrong is important.
It's not even clear to me he was arguing against evolution. To be a deist, you have to believe that evolution took place, but we were also created with an innate sense of truth. Those two ideas are in direct conflict with each other. I'm curious how much cognitive dissonance he's experiencing.
But it's like, all I wanted was, okay, if your argument is there must be a God in order for us to be able to identify what is true. If I ask you to defend that proposition and your statement is, well, it almost seems like the universe is a simulation, and then when I call that out because it's completely irrelevant, then you want to say, well, maybe we're all deities. You're floundering. You are desperately trying to avoid the reality, which is there's zero good reason to believe in any God, deistic or otherwise. And that prospect terrifies people. That prospect, especially once you've been indoctrinated into nonsensical things about, well, if there's no God, there's no truth. Or if there's no God, there's no morality. If there's no God, then all this life is wasted. If there's no God, there's no this. You've been indoctrinated into a bunch of fear-mongering stuff, so that when you're faced with the reality, which is the only reasonable position is at a minimum weak atheism, the position of, I do not have evidentiary warrant to believe in a God. God has not met no God proposition's ever met its burden of proof. When you're faced with that proposition, all of those fears you were indoctrinated into come up, and they make you flail around desperately. Well, maybe we're all deities. Maybe it's a simulation. Maybe without God, maybe there's a God that we just can't detect. So since we haven't detected a God, and it doesn't make sense we haven't detected a God, if there is a God, maybe God's undetectable, which means I've just detected the undetectable, because by virtue of it hiding from detection, and yet it must still be there, that means I've detected it, which means, hey, hang on, if I detected the undetectable, maybe I'm God, which means maybe we're all God. And you've just led yourself in a nice little circular jerk-off tap dance session that is not productive at all and doesn't help us understand reality.
Matt, what are you talking about? It's proof of the cover-up.
It's exactly what they want you to think.
Yep.
We got a load of callers I want to get to, and we kind of danced around a couple of things. Let's start with Reese in Toronto, who's been waiting for a long time. So, Reese, how are you, and how can we help?
I'm good.
I hope you're doing all right in Toronto. I've got family up there. And today's events have been
I'm going to try to be a better Canadian.
Well, as long as you're not driving cars across Niagara loaded with explosives,
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no. I like to fly to the U.S. if anything. So my thing was, I was having trouble communicating my humanist values to my family recently because I guess I became atheist this year, but I haven't been religious for like at least a decade. And I ended up getting in an argument with my family about some of like the topics that are going on in the world, you know, with the war over in the Middle East and a whole bunch of other political issues. And they seem to be leaning more right wing, even though they themselves are not particularly religious. And so I wanted to see if you guys had any suggestions on how to reapproach those kind of topics without getting into a screaming match.
Yeah,
Well, Jeff, I know we've heard me address this about 1 billion times, so go for it.
Sure. It is a challenge, and the solution that I have come to, I should say, most of my family is religious in some persuasion or another, and we just don't really argue or talk about it. I kind of just accept that they have their views. They seem to accept that I have my views. It's kind of hard for them not to, given that I'm a professional atheist. But yeah, when I do have those discussions, I actually often try and fall back on something that Matt taught me while I was watching the ACA years ago, even before I was a lawyer. That you know, what do you believe and why do you believe it? And just have a civil conversation starting from that point, and try and remember that, you know, these are your family members. They hopefully aren't trying to disrespect you. You're not trying to disrespect them with your beliefs, and just do your best to keep things civil. And if things don't, if somebody's gonna go off the handle on this, then end the conversation. That can be difficult around Thanksgiving, but you know, just step back and say, "I'm no longer willing to have this conversation with you. Let's talk about, you know, the Blue Jays or something."
Luckily, our Thanksgiving was like a month ago, so I get to until Christmas for those kind of arguments. Okay. But yeah, I really like. I feel like Matt. I watched one of your videos, and that was kind of this summer, and I was kind of like, oh wait, I'm an atheist. But like, so I feel like a lot of you guys, your shows are really like informative, and I really like the ones where you do help out some atheists who are going through some transition periods. So thank you for that. And I guess one of the things was, like you said, like if somebody flies off the handle in the conversation, funnily enough, I was the one to fly off the handle because I felt very like opinionated about certain like bodily autonomy rights and things that, and how, you know, people are complaining about trans rights to bodily autonomy, but they're forgetting that some other people are losing their bodily autonomy or never had it. For example, like intersex people have a lot of times the doctors get to decide, sometimes even for the parents, what they should cut off or adjust because of societal norms. And that was something that really kind of struck a nerve with me, because my brother kind of said, how are you going to bring intersex people into this conversation? And I was like, well, it's bodily autonomy and a lot of those things that they have, especially because it deals with a lot of gender identity and sex. They are kind of related in some way. And so, you know, saying that people who are trans can't get gender affirming care, yet disregarding the fact that there are people who are intersex that are not even able to choose what gender they want to be at the age where they can understand it. It's chosen for them. I feel like those kind of things were, that's where I kind of like, I wasn't able to kind of articulate what I wanted to say without it kind of becoming very, very defensive.
Yeah, No, when you're talking about you're the one that flew off the handle. Me too. Many times.
Yeah,
I know that comes as a surprise.
Remember, keep it, I would encourage you to avoid that happening in the future, and I know how hard that can be, is think about what you were feeling as you led up to that moment, and really examine that. Examine the thoughts that you were having so that the next time this conversation happens, or a conversation that might touch on similarly sensitive subjects, that you can recognize the early stages and either, take some deep breaths to try and control it, or say, we're getting into something that I get very upset about. I don't think we should talk about this. If you don't think you can control, if you don't think that doing some, breathing and, whatever tactics you might use, counting to 10, those kinds of things. If you don't think those are going to work, just say, sorry, we can't talk about this because it upsets me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's worthwhile to point out. I mean, I had a 6-hour serious argument with my mom where I'm probably the only one that even got close to, well, no, that's not true. There was stuff, but I definitely am the one that got closer to flying off the handle or raising my voice and other stuff. And it's when you and I, Reese, we're in a weird position, Jeff and the rest of us too, but we're in this position where we wake up every day in a world that is obviously fucked up. And as we walk around trying to explain to people that it's fucked up, they can't see it. We're sitting here talking about how do we protect people's rights? How do we protect the right of a pregnant person to bodily autonomy? And they are in a mix between apathetic or directly opposed to that proposition. We all would probably say, I want a better world. And yet they think a better world is one where when someone's pregnant, they can be forced to carry that child to term by the state in order to conform and comport with a particular group of people's opinions about morality. And I think that is an absolutely backward way to look at the world, that for me, and I get that I'm not everybody, but for me, it's ridiculously easy and obvious to understand. And there's no person on the planet of any age that should be granted the right to use someone else's body without their consent. I mean, that's just obvious. And that means that if we're going to say that a fetus can do that, now we're giving special rights to a fetus that no other person has. And so that means that personhood is irrelevant because it doesn't matter whether or not it's a person. You are in fact granting it those special rights. And so now the question is, how are you justifying this violation of someone else's individual personal sovereignty? They don't have an answer.
And How do you it was kind of like what I would kind of like connect it to is a lot of what Jordan Peterson has been saying recently about, like, that's just the way the world works and that's just how it is. And I'm like, I don't want that. I want to be able to, like, wake up and say the world is a little bit better today than it was yesterday. Not, oh, well, we can't do anything about it because majority wins or whatever, or money wins.
The world will be a little bit better today.
That's what I kind of got upset, because like they're acting like we can't fix these things by having discussions and focusing on what everybody it needs for well-being.
I think the world would be better today than it was yesterday if everybody would stop listening to Jordan Peterson. I mean, that's a start.
I agree.
It's not enough, but it's a start.
And bear in mind that if things can't change through discussion, the only other way they can change is through violence, and that's not an option.
Yeah, I don't want that either. I mean, I'm looking at the news today, and I'm like, thank God for a ceasefire, but it should have never started in the first place. And that's, yeah. But thank you guys so much for answering my question, kind of helping me through it.
Thanks for
thank you so much.
I want to add one more thing just to tag on to what I was saying before. Mm-hmm. If you feel like you're getting heated and aren't going to be able to rein things in, say, rather than, I think what I said earlier was, I can't have this conversation. But maybe say, let's have this conversation over email. Because you have an opportunity to write your thoughts out, and write them at your own pace. And it's a lot harder to get into a heated argument with someone when you're writing down your thoughts rather than saying it to them and hearing their responses in the moment.
Yeah, I probably win just because I'm an email warrior, but yeah, thank you for all the advice.
Okay.
Thanks, Reese. And
have a good one.
Don't worry about getting frustrated. Just, you can go with what Jeff said and others, which is, one of the things that you can say is, I can't keep having this conversation right now. I love you, but if we keep talking right now, I'm not going to like you, and I don't want that to happen. So let's stick a pin in this and deal with it in email or deal with it another time or countless other things, because, the relationship is worth more to me than us trying to solve world peace or abortion rights or whatever in the kitchen over a holiday.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We have a handful of calls left, and 0 theistic callers. So, by the way, once we're done with the callers, we're going to get into the super chats, and we read every super chat here that's over $10. I would do more. Last week I did do more because I was here by myself, and we did a special thing last week, so we read all of them over $5. Anytime I'm here by myself, that's probably the special treat I'll do, because I know there are people who want to ask questions. It's not about being greedy. It's about trying to make sure I don't do a 5-hour show, because I'm not Forrest Valkai and I can't survive a 5-hour show. I got a heart. I got a picture of my heart on my refrigerator. If you haven't seen it, you can see a picture of my heart when we go downstairs.
I'll take a look later.
Or at least they told me it was my heart. I suppose they could have given me a picture of anybody's heart and I wouldn't have a way to prove it. But
all right. Did you have an innate sense that it was truly your heart?
I'm pretty sure that Occam's razor means they probably didn't go out and grab somebody else's heart. But we've got Rob in Wisconsin, pronouns are he, him, with a legal question. So, Rob, you're on with Jeff Blackwell.
Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for taking my call. Hi, Jeff. I've been meaning to call you guys about this for a week or two, but work has just made it difficult. I got on tonight and saw you were streaming. So a friend of my fiance's that she works with is in this scenario where she's separated and divorced from the father of her youngest child. She has two, separated from both, but the one's got a great dad, very, all good. The younger child is in a situation where when he goes to the father's house, there's a roommate there at the father's house that is very much, from my understanding, into far right wing, very Nazi adjacent, maybe just Nazi type groups. She said she can identify ink on the guy, some of the symbols and things of that nature. And when the kid comes home, he's a great kid, but when he comes home from dad's house, he's very bossy towards his mom, like he never is. Like he's picking up some kind of, you got to put women in their place type stuff from the guys, and he's hit kids at school on Monday or Tuesday after a weekend at the dad's house, and it's just, there's a lingering come home from dad's house. There's a few days of violent bad behavior, and then it's good, but the weekend comes and he's got to go back to dad's house, and she's sort of, kind of running out of ideas and options, and she can't afford to hire every lawyer around and take them into fight. Is there advocacy group, something she could reach out to and get a an idea or a direction? Because she's just having a hard time figuring out where to begin. Because my understanding is what they told her when they kind of made the custody agreement was, well, yeah, I mean, until the guy shoots heroin in front of his kid, you're kind of screwed.
Say that last part again. You got kind of muddled.
Oh, sorry. The kind of what she told me that her lawyers, when they made the custody agreement, told her she had these concerns about the guy was, until they're, doing something as blatant as shooting heroin in front of the kid, there's not much they can do if it's, ideas and things. They need to cause actual harm before they would step in. And she doesn't have the resources to dig deeper than that's kind of what she was told.
Sure. Well, let me preface this with, this is not legal advice. I don't know where this person is, what jurisdiction they're in. Chances are I'm not admitted to practice law there, and I haven't interacted with this person. But
of course,
so there are some, and family law in particular varies pretty widely from state to state. So it can be challenging to talk about these issues broadly. However, there are plenty of jurisdictions where if child comes home from one parent to the custodial parent and is getting in fights at school and things like that, there are jurisdictions, I think many jurisdictions, that would take that into account. Now, it might not be the sole thing that they would, they might say, well, let's put the child in, a monthly therapy session or something like that, rather than muck with the custodial arrangement. However, it sounds like there are a few other things at play here that altogether might justify altering the custodial arrangement. But there's also a question. A lot of this depends on the age of the child. I don't know if you know I don't know if you know how old this person's children are, and this child in particular. How old are they off the top of your head?
It's kindergarten or first grade is the young one. So what's that, around between 6 and 8, something like that?
Okay.
And it's been, literal violence has happened. He's struck kids, threatened kids. He hit his mom right in the lip one time after coming home from this environment.
I think it's certainly something.
And the other kid's great. It's not coming from her or.
Okay. If I had a client walk into the door and say that, I would certainly take seriously that there may be some options in the legal sense. In terms of, are there advocacy groups? Because this varies pretty widely from state to state. It's there, as far as I'm aware, there isn't a national organization that handles these kinds of things, but I could be wrong. This is not my practice area.
Of course.
However, there are in pretty much every county, at least in every state, nonprofit legal services. I don't know what her income is like, but for low-income people, I handled a divorce when I was at my law clinic in law school. There are clinics at law schools that deal especially with family law matters. Because it's good training for the students and they're overseen by licensed attorneys. That might be an option she could look into. And she could look up whatever state legal services in Google and probably get at least a few hits. Depending on where she is, she might have to travel a little bit to speak with them in person. But there are legal services available for this type of thing, though it sounded like you said she had an attorney, at least when the custodial arrangement was being set up. So maybe she still has an attorney.
Not currently, no. That was before I met her, but I know it, when they separated, there was some sort of family court type thing that did happen, and an official custody agreement was made, and he was incarcerated for a while too, and then I think that might have been developed when he got out to okay, now he's out, what's going to happen with his rights as a father and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if I heard that from a client, I would think it's certainly something worth looking into and seeing whether prior cases in this jurisdiction have taken that into account. Really, that's the best I can say, because again, don't know where she is, don't have all the facts, don't practice in this area, don't take legal advice from YouTube call-in shows.
Yeah.
But that would be
no
my
point.
yeah.
By the way, at no point should anyone ever think that anything we've given out on the line by anybody, guest or host, is actual legal advice that they should pay any attention to at all.
Yeah, and when I say that would be my advice to her, I mean that would be my suggestion to her, is reach out to legal services in her area to see if they would be interested in taking her on.
Okay, you mentioned something like there may be something called like maybe law school clinics, or maybe something in like the county or statewide. I'm just trying to jot down some notes to search.
Yeah, and if you search
as well,
if you search for the state's name, legal services, you're going to get some results. Maybe you might want to add low-income legal services or something like that. I don't know how much she's earning. She might not be eligible for their services, but that's a place to start. And even if she's like makes too much for them to, because they have like a threshold very often where if you're making enough to afford your own attorney, they have to use their resources for those who really can't afford attorneys. Anyway, if she's outside,
and it would be that sort of thing. It's a bartender, single mom, 2 kids kind of type.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just going to say, even if she was outside the scope of who they serve, they may very well be able to refer her to a reputable attorney who practices in this and can give her some good advice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that gives me some leads and more than I knew going into this. So thank you.
Sure.
All right. I won't hold you guys up. Thank you. You guys are awesome. I appreciate the work both of you do. Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Matt, did you want to say anything on that, or?
Oh, sorry.
No.
Okay.
I have nothing in the realm of legal knowledge here, other than just thanks for caring about some people who are in an incredibly difficult situation. And
absolutely,
it's one of those things where it's like you hear stories and you just wouldn't believe some of them some of the time, that this is what's actually going on, or that somebody's actually having to deal with this or face it. It is bizarre what I hear some people have to deal with. And like I was saying, when we're talking with Reese about, we wake up in a world that doesn't make sense. And I don't know what can happen to potentially do it, but we've got Mary in Florida has questions about case rulings with regard to Trump that Jeff may be able to address.
Okay. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Matt and Jeff. Yes, I watch for my legal prompt information. I watch Midas Touch and Glenn Kirshner on YouTube, because they really break it down and kind of teach law 101 in the cases. And the one that all the cases bother me, but the one the most was the recent ruling by a judge. I don't remember her name, but she found that Trump did incite the insurrection, but yet that doesn't take him off the ballot for the 14th Amendment, Section 3. And
I read that decision.
Is that going to be able to be appealed?
It's certainly something that can be appealed. I think I don't know what the timeline is for appeals in that jurisdiction. I want to say this is a decision out of a Colorado trial court, but I could be wrong.
Yes, I think it is.
Essentially, the judge went through and did a ton of factual findings as to what happened around the 2020 election and January 6th and all of that, and found that for the purposes of Article 3 or Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, that Trump's actions did amount to an insurrection. The problem is that the language of Article 4, I keep saying Article 14, the language of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment specifically applies to, well, it applies to senators, representatives, and I think there's a third category, and then all other officers of the United States. And this trial judge concluded that because that list that seemed to go from highest officials to miscellaneous other officials did not explicitly include the president, that the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, doesn't apply to him in particular. That is a reading, an interpretation of that of the language that has been argued by some. Others argue that that officer of the United States should clearly include the presidency. They probably didn't include it in the drafting because they didn't think that a president would engage in an insurrection against the country he's in charge of. That thought may not have crossed their minds, or they thought it was so obvious that it didn't need to be included. Who knows? I would say officer of the United States includes the president. And it would be absurd to interpret it in a way that didn't include the president. Nonetheless, this trial judge found the other way. I will say that is the more small c conservative. It is the more the less disruptive interpretation. And so I believe it's the Colorado Attorney General can appeal that decision, and the appellate courts may very well find that it should be interpreted more broadly to include the president. It's fairly. It is entirely normal for a trial court judge on a brand new issue to play things safe in terms of the interpretation of whether it's the Constitution or a statute, and leave it to the appellate courts to interpret the law further. So I was disappointed when I saw that decision, but it also makes entire sense to me that a trial court judge would issue that decision. We'll have to wait and see what comes out on appeal. And also, this was a trial court in federal court in Colorado. It's not binding on anyone else, so we may see different conclusions reached by courts in other states. I think we're likely to see that. There are lawsuits on this all over the place. I will say, let me give you my interpretation of the law here, which is worth absolutely nothing. And that is that the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment specifically says that it is up to Congress by, I think, a 2/3 vote. I don't have the language in front of me. But I think a 2/3 vote of Congress would have to approve someone who engaged in insurrection holding office. Essentially, to have that section not apply to you, Congress would have to approve it by a pretty overwhelming majority. And because the amendment specifically gives the authority to make this decision to Congress, it's really not the court's place to weigh in on this, because it is a political question for Congress to answer. How exactly that would play out in Congress, I have no idea. I presume someone would introduce a bill saying, a resolution or a bill. I think it couldn't be a bill because that would be a bill of attainder. Anyway, they would have to put forward something to be voted on to say, notwithstanding the third section of the 14th Amendment, Donald Trump is permitted to hold the office of President of the United States. And that would have to get, I believe, a 2/3 majority. That isn't going to happen.
Well, that's not going to happen with the House of Republicans that we have now.
No.
But also, and maybe you know, when the Jack Smith case in under Judge Chutkan in D.C., he didn't include insurrection in one of the charges, did he?
Well,
he left
insurrection,
that one off.
That word is not a federal crime as far as I'm aware. So it wouldn't be something that you could charge somebody with. There's a bunch of other stuff that he can be charged with, or that there's a lot of other federal crimes that essentially are aspects of insurrection. That was the other thing I wanted to raise, is it's unlikely that anyone is going to say it applies to a candidate for office, before they have a nomination and are actually on the ballot for that office, and before they have been actually convicted of something that amounts to insurrection. So that's something to bear in mind.
So do you
know
still the
presumption
right
of
off what the 4 charges are that Jack Smith is holding in D.C.?
Not off the top of my head.
Was it just obstruction or blocking what's the word I'm looking for?
I would have to go look. He's got so many different charges. He's got something like 60 charges against him in various jurisdictions. I haven't dived deeply into what each individual charge is and which jurisdiction it's in. I don't know if Matt might be Googling right now. He may be able to answer. But
Matt is not Googling right now.
Okay, never mind. I apologize. I simply don't know.
That's all right. I can't keep up either. There's so many, courts going after him. It's hard to know. 91 charges, but I'm just I'm really fearful that if he was to get reelected, I mean, I'm considering leaving the country. I just, it's terrifying, the thought of him.
Yeah, it is disturbing. And as someone who sues the government for a living, it's particularly disturbing to me.
It's job security for you.
To an extent. Unless he starts rounding up all the vermin that don't like him, in which case it would be the opposite of job security.
Fair.
Yeah.
It is very disturbing.
And then, yeah,
and straight up fascists.
And yeah, and I feel like, cause I'm a humanist, and I'm like, well, I mean, I'm a straight, over 60 white female. I'm probably would be okay, but I worry about the rounding up of people putting in camps and stuff. I mean, this is right out of Hitler's playbook. And then we've got the whole religious right, Christian nationalism wrapping the Bible in the flag. And I'm just a nervous wreck. I'm sorry.
I don't
hear you. I mean, you're probably right. As somebody approaching retirement age, heterosexual white female, you're probably safe. It's just you won't have anybody decent to talk to if you get to stay, and the rest of us have to go.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I will just mention, polls a year ahead of the election are worthless. I take much more seriously the results of the election that happened just a couple of weeks ago that was overwhelmingly in favor of sane, limited government. And hopefully that carries through to next year. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't, other than people getting voter fatigue. But it's a huge presidential election, so
and whenever I do see polls posted, I read the fine print and I look, and it's only like they've asked 1,500 people, and it was probably on landlines, and only people like 60 and older have landlines. They're probably Trumpers. So I feel like it's just a very skewed poll. That's how the polls, I don't. Am I correct on that?
I mean, polls are, there's no perfect poll. And pollsters have been grappling with the cord cutting of essentially everyone under 60 for a while now. I am hesitant to get into a mindset of the polls are just wrong on this. That's what tripped up, I think, the Romney campaign in 2012, was they were trying to unskew the polls, and it turns out the polls were accurate. But they thought that the outcome was going to be different than what the polls were saying, and tried to. There was a whole bunch of ridiculousness around that. Anyway,
but it's like the sample size is so small that 1,500 people. That's nothing compared to the number of voters in the country.
So first of all, sample size is important, but you can still get a representative sample size even with a small amount. And so what we know, there's a ton of problems with polls. We know that, but the people who do polls are so good at what they do that I'd be more worried about the fact that they can intentionally word a poll and seek out a sample that's non-representative and making it potentially appear representative to give the results that they're more interested in. There's only 1,500 people. So you can find out a lot from 1,500 people. I looked at a poll the other day from people in the West Bank and in Gaza, and it's a fairly small poll. It was like about 1,500, maybe a little bit less, of what their support was for Hamas's terrorist attack on October 7th. And the numbers are staggering. And so then it's like, okay, is there a problem with the poll? Is there a problem with the way the question's worded? Is there a problem with the sample size? Is it a representative sample? And the truth is, we can all sit here and armchair quarterback it, but we don't know. I don't know what the methodology was.
Yeah.
And so I take the polls seriously, but I don't consider them to be true. It's one of those things where you got to work against.
And I think a year ahead of time, you'd have to have a pretty broad definition of taking a poll seriously to take a poll a year ahead of an election as indication of anything.
Yeah,
I don't want to discount the work that went into the poll.
It's a year away. I'm trying not to lose it. It's a year away. A lot can happen in a year.
Yeah. And one thing that it does is galvanize Democrats to be like, hey, we've got to really work on these numbers. And that's a good thing. So, and they've got a year to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I enjoyed the show. Thank you, Matt and Jeff.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
All right. Bye.
All right. Take care. So we had one more caller that I was going to get to, and they evidently gave up.
Oh.
And, well. It was somebody had called in specifically to make a case that, or they had evidence, or they were able to show, thought they were able to show that Christianity is false. So Charles, don't bother calling back today, because we're going to move on to super chats here in just a second. I'm going to get a link. There we go. Charles, if you, by the way, this is your chance to get your super chats in, because we're getting ready to start reading them here. We got a handful, but you guys can amp it up some more and get Jeff and I to give answers. But Charles, this thing of you have evidence that Christianity is false. I really, really call in on Sunday, call in next Wednesday, whatever the case may be, because I really want to hear this. But I can already tell you in advance what my questions are. So, define Christianity, because as it stands now, there's well over 1,000 different denominations that all identify as Christian, and there's not a single point of doctrine. There's almost not a single point of doctrine that isn't in disagreement by some, right down to whether or not Jesus was God, which is a peculiar thing to say. But there are some commonalities between the majority of them. But if you were going to say you have falsified Christianity, you then have to have a definition of Christianity and a way to show that that definition is false. And so then the follow-up question would be, what does this tell us about all the other versions of Christianity? Because, for example, if somebody's view of Christianity was just a particular type of Catholicism, and you were able to demonstrate that the Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation was demonstrably false, like you got communion wafers in the middle of Mass after they'd been prayed over when they're supposed to become the body, and then somebody said it doesn't become the body until you put it inside somebody else's body, but they put it in their mouth, and at that point it's supposed to turn into the actual body of Christ, and somehow you snatched it and did DNA testing on it. Even that wouldn't prove that version of Christianity isn't true, because for all you know, God just miracled it back to being a stale piece of crap instead of, his actual flesh. As once you have a God that can do anything, and you have people arguing that God moves in mysterious ways, et cetera, and we don't, the ways of the Lord are mysterious, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, nobody uses the word mystery more than Catholics at a funeral. But if you've got a way to actually falsify some version of Christianity, that would be cool, and I'm interested in. But man, there's a lot of work to be done before we can get to that point. All right, let's get on to super chats. Here we go. Super chat number 1, $5 from William Mattes. Hey Matt, what's your D&D class? I don't have one. Also, how do you pronounce pecan? This is very important and may ruin my love for you. Okay. I say pecan generally. I have also said pecan. But pecan, I think, is the way that I say it almost all the time.
Do you have the same is true for me. I don't. I've played various tabletop role-playing games. I've actually never played D&D, so I don't have a D&D class. And unless I'm talking about pecan pie, where sometimes I will say pecan pie, I say pecan.
But it's still pecan or pecan, not pecan.
No.
Or pecan. Pecan, I think, is the one that is the most problematic. But
it's really funny because that's one we said growing up in my house was pecan pie.
Pecan pie? That makes sense. When it comes to D&D, so first of all, I played D&D before there was AD&D, back when you had to take a waxy crayon that wasn't really a Crayola crayon and scrub it into the dice because the dice were molded, but they weren't colored. So that way you could see the number that you're rolling. And I played around a little bit with that. And then around the time I went in the Navy, we were playing AD&D, and I had a full collection of books. I played a number of different characters. I don't have a specific class, but very shortly after getting involved in that, my friend Russell, hey man, invented what I think is the greatest tabletop RPG system. It was a percentile-based system, and it could be used for anything. Its name changed a couple of times depending on who was the DM. And the biggest problem with it is that you would have had a massive bookshelf of all the books and tables, and because hey, if just take a look at the weapons information you have, because you could be playing a medieval scenario, you could be playing a Wild West scenario, you could be playing a modern scenario, you could be playing a future scenario. You need all the weapons for all of those potential scenarios, and you need to know what some of them are likely to do against each other. If I've got a Kusarigama and you've got an AK-47, I'm probably screwed. But it also depends on the situation. Anyway, it was a beautiful percentile-based system. We played a lot in there, and I had one character that was a pilot. I had another one that was a ninja. But yeah, that's as close as I can get. Thanks, William. Your turn.
Oh, I read it?
Can you? Yeah, you're going to read them. We're going to alternate.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't realize.
That's my fault.
1999 from Greg Markowski. My niece's wedding was this past Saturday. Totally secular. No gods were mentioned, even once. So refreshing. Thanks, Matt, Jeff, Mods, Screeners, and Arden for the show.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Greg. My wedding was totally secular, too.
I officiated one of those weddings. Not yours, but I've officiated a totally secular wedding.
Yeah, no, Aron officiated my wedding. $10 from Crystal Butcher. And offered to officiate the next one. But thanks, Crystal. I love that.
Am I taking this one?
Yeah, we'll go back and forth.
All right, $10 from Jack Schwartz. Love the work you all do on the line. Every host is superb. On another note, Matt, you, Arden, and Aron helped convince me to get into raising snakes with my 8-year-old daughter. She is obsessed with them. Nice. Careful.
Yeah. It starts with one. By the way, honey, you want to bring me a Honduran?
Sure, 1 second.
I will take control of the super chats and we will show off one of our new snakes that's still in quarantine. But so also $10 to Jack Schwartz. I know Jimmy isn't producing tonight. Regardless, he should still fuck himself. Matt and Arden try to find time to do more snake videos. We are actually. The equipment that you're seeing Jeff through right now is the setup that we use. We pulled it out of the snake room, but we use in the snake room for this. We have made. Okay, since somebody asked, nobody can get too upset about this. We have made some changes to the house and enclosures and locations and stuff. We have one of the spare beds from Arden's office is now taken apart and moved, and there will be enclosures there for Raz, the ornate. There we go.
She's wrapped on.
I got you. There we go. So this is an albino Honduran milk snake. And so basically those really white light sections would be black on a normal Honduran milk snake. She is part of a breeding pair. She is also het hypo and het anarthristic. And her breeding partner is visually normal, but is het hypo, het anarthristic, and het albino. And
actually tangerine, not normal.
Oh, tangerine. And so from that, yeah, there's a cat. Daphne wanted attention. But we'll be able to breed those and produce albinos and snows and anaries and I forget, it's like the mega cross between the three of them. So you get like a pink snake with pink eyes and white stuff. And these are our first Hondurans. They are, this pair is just crazy chill and so sweet. And I will now pass it back off. There we go. So there, you got to see a snack tonight. That's one of our new Honduran milk snakes. And there's the next one.
All right. $20 from Jared Jerbear Fuller. Wishing the hosts, the mods, and everyone in that chat a safe, joyous, and happy Thanksgiving tomorrow. Thank you,
Except
Jared.
for the ones that are in Canada.
Sure.
Because they already had their Thanksgiving. You can't give thanks twice. What would people think if you were just like thanking people all the time?
Right.
$10 from Larry Fishman. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, Jerbear, happy Thanksgiving as well.
Yeah. Larry Fishman, Trump is both a product and beneficiary of both the fundamental flaws in and decay of the U.S. Constitution and the government based thereon. Sorry for the confusing phrasing. it may be confusing phrasing, but I think I got it. And yeah, it is. It's like when people say democracy is the worst government except for all the others. Our Constitution is awful, and yet still better than it's still my preferred Constitution. And if we would live up to the principles of the Constitution, and allow refining for this living document to actually catch up to where we are, rather than constantly trying to rehash and move things backward, I think it would be the best Constitution on the planet. It may be the best Constitution on the planet right now. I'm not familiar with all of them, but I'll tell you, the way it is being abused and misused and misrepresented, our political system is horribly, horribly broken. And I don't know that that is the fault of the Constitution as much as it is what we've allowed us to do with it.
I agree. I don't think the Constitution has its flaws, but it hasn't decayed since it was drafted. Our government has just calcified since it's drafted, and it's not good. Hello, Daphne. Is this me again?
Yes, it is.
$10 from Larry Fishman. Question for Jeff. Have you run into any issues or roadblocks related to the history and tradition test? Why, yes, I have. Because it is designed to be a one-way ratchet that only helps essentially conservative Christians, and is only applied when it can be used to aid conservative Christians. Unfortunately, there is so much that there just isn't really. There are so many legal questions on which there is no history to point to that it is almost useless as a test if it was one that you wanted to try and hold to. I don't think it's even a test worth holding to. I think at least one of the people responsible for the Constitution, Thomas Jefferson, was completely opposed to both originalism and any sort of history and tradition test. There's actually, on the Jefferson Memorial in D.C., inscribed on the wall in very large letters, is essentially Thomas Jefferson telling originalists and history and tradition types to put their big boy pants on and and knock it off. So I have run into this problem. That's too big a topic to go into in a college.
All right. I got a question here. Can you go ahead and read this one for me too?
Sure. $10 from Landry Hyde. Do either of you believe Argentina will be a study of libertarian policy, either positive or negative, over the next 10 years or so, now that they have elected Javier Milei? Is it Milei? GFJY exclamation points. I don't know what that means.
I don't know how to pronounce it, but evidently the election was like today.
I think it was last night.
Yes. Yeah, yesterday.
So much so that if you go to the Google article for Argentina, it doesn't list him at all. His name does not appear. That's how new this is, that the Wikipedia article for Argentina hasn't been updated. And so my answer to you, Landry, is I haven't spent any time at all following politics in Argentina. Don't know who he is. Don't know what's going on with the policies there. So I couldn't possibly give a guess at what the 10-year impact of this is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same. I would say that if, to the extent that he holds to libertarian points of view, it will be a negative study. over the next 10 years. But I have no knowledge of Argentina really beyond just they had an election. I know where it is on the globe. Yes, I know, but don't step on the keyboard.
Good luck getting her to stop doing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you, Landy, but I just don't.
Yeah.
It's $20 from Eric America. Thank you, Eric America. Seasonal affective disorder sucks. Welcome to Syracuse, New York. It's, I don't know. Is it already getting miserable up there in Syracuse? I don't suffer from seasonal affective disorder as far as I know, but it's one of those things I can completely understand. And I know people who suffer in different ways. Some people, when it's the winter time is just too much. And for some people, the summertime is too much. Matter of fact, Beth, my ex-wife, fall is her favorite. Fall is her favorite season. And summer was just an absolute miserable, nonsense. And I think that her take on it was certainly a version of seasonal affective disorder. Yeah. See, you're getting all the Daphne in one dose there.
She's managed to click on all the wrong buttons over here.
Yeah, can't have her push the one that says disconnect. The one that says disconnect would be bad. This is the final super chat until somebody sends in the next one.
22 euros from Satyam FIFA. Far-right, anti-immigration, etc. party has just won a landslide victory in the Netherlands, and this just seems to be a worldwide trend. I want to ask Matt, what reason do we have to be hopeful in times like these? Sparsh.
So, here's why I remain hopeful about some things. Only because there are people actively saying, how do we fix this? How do we remain optimistic? What do we do to avoid having to give up? Merely the fact that there are people who are saying, I don't want to give up. What the hell do I have to do to make this so that every day is not a miserable disaster? All of those people are finding themselves in a world that they don't recognize, as I was talking about earlier. Some of us have been talking about this for ages. Others have been oblivious. Others took things that people like myself said, where I've previously said, there's no way Roe will ever be overturned. I got into arguments with my ex-wife who was telling me it was going to happen, and I was saying it wouldn't happen. And I think I had really good reasons to reach that conclusion based on the unlikelihood of overturning a precedent on something that had been around so long and had become so ingrained in society and everything else. I figured that there was going to be a continued parade of trap laws to make it effectively illegal everywhere, which was bad enough. But the fact that I woke up and said, holy shit, they just reversed something I did not think they could reverse, means that every day I have to realize everything is potentially fair game for ideologues to reverse and change. The nice thing is that it was really easy. It was instantaneous for me to recognize that. It didn't matter how many times, Andrew Seidel or somebody had come up and said, oh, this is going to happen. As soon as the second it happened, I caught on. But there are people who never even spent any time thinking about whether or not that was a possibility. They never spent any time considering what could or couldn't happen to the court. When people were voting in 2016, Beth, who I've now mentioned 8 times on this show probably today, she just tweeted out, the entirety of the tweet was the goddamn motherfucking Supreme Court. Just letting people know that's what the entire election is about. You think you're voting for president. You're not voting for president. You are voting to save the Supreme Court. She was preaching this like a mantra. There are people who've never thought about those things, and some of them are now thinking about them. Some of them are now saying, you know what? I didn't used to care about politics, but now I do. So, yeah, there's been a landslide victory in the Netherlands for a far-right anti-immigration party. That, I hope, will wake up some other people. Things are very, very, very likely to get much worse before they get better. But I think that what's happening is a mix of the death throes of flawed ideologies and religions, coupled with a massive stigma or a massive cultural apathy that has just plagued the planet, not for the last 7 years or 8 years, but for the last 50 to 75 years. We've been obsessed with every new thing we've got and the internet and more information. And all of that is good stuff. I'm not knocking it. I'm not saying we should go back to, farming our own food or whatever else. But the notion, both sides are the same, all sides are the same. My vote doesn't matter. There's nothing I can do. This disinformation machine that has been built and manipulated. It's a friend of mine, an acquaintance of mine, just the other day pointed out, it's not there to make you believe a lie. It's there to make you not be able to identify what the truth is. It's why when I'm talking about what's going on in Gaza right now, I have friends on the left who I think have lost their fucking minds and want to portray Hamas as just oppressed individuals fighting back against an oppressive Israeli government. And that's not entirely wrong. And yet we're still talking about a terrorist organization. We're still talking about people who killed and raped and took hostages. And then you go and you look at Israel and you've got right-wing government there. You've got Netanyahu. I mean, he ain't Putin, but he's not a nice guy. He's not a good guy. He's not a humanist. He's not advocating for reasonable secular values or those things. He's definitely right-wing. But is he to blame for this? And how do you know who's who? What's the fault is? When you see a hospital gets blown up and there are people saying, oh, Hamas did that. Oh, no, Palestinian authority did that. No, Israel did that. No, a second group did that. Oh, no, it's a false flag event. And you have no way sitting in your home to investigate or find out what the truth is. We have, once upon a time, when the president took to the airwaves and said, my fellow Americans, I come to you today with grave news. This terrible thing has just happened. And while it grieves me to send our citizens into a war-torn conflict, we must, to preserve human life and dignity, involve ourselves in this. And that's how we went to war. That's how we went to war quite often for good reasons. And then it became something that could be manipulated. It became something that could be changed. It became something where you and your trust was taken advantage of. And because of that, we've now reached the point where you don't have trust. And for good reason. Why on earth would you trust your government, some government, any government? Why on earth would you trust this news station, that news station, the other station? They're all the same, they're all corrupt, except they're not. That disinformation that makes you feel confused, uninformed, unvalued, and irrelevant is exactly what is needed. Nobody has to lie to you and convince you that their lie is true. They just have to give you the misinformation so that you miss what is most likely true. And that all war is awful. There are no easy solutions to any of this. But the only way that I can wake up and still have hope is to realize what's happened and to do what I can to help other people realize what has happened as well. The very notion that, oh, well, they just lie. Okay. But knowing that somebody's lying doesn't tell you what the truth is. We need to work on restoring trustworthiness, trustable sources, so that we don't ever have to commit lives for a false claim of weapons of mass destruction, so that we don't ever get duped into being the genocidal organization, the genocidal government, that we don't ever have to sit idly by for fear of choosing the wrong side. Right now, there are people dying who are innocent. And if you're going to say, these people, they're not innocent. I saw somebody the other day, the notion, saying innocent, on the floor of the House, saying the notion that they were innocent Palestinians was like saying they were innocent Nazis. Member of the House of Representatives said that on the floor of the House. Doesn't matter where he got his information from or where you got your information from. That's the world we live in. And so the way to try to be hopeful is to see it, tell people about it, get other people to start seeing it too. Because we've got a world to fix, and it's still fixable. We might be completely screwed on climate change. We might be completely screwed in a number of different areas, but we're not screwed on access to reliable information. We just have a terrible signal to noise ratio right now, and we need to fix that. And that's what makes me at least a little bit optimistic. We got a couple other super chats that came in during this. I'll do this real quick. $20 from Eric America because a cat meowed. Well, get Daphne back in there. If we're getting $20 every time the cat meows,
there you go.
We can pay down the national debt tomorrow because that cat won't shut up. You grab this one, Jeff, and I'll get the next one.
Sure, $10 from Jack Schwartz. Keep the show going. I am not done making chip dip yet. Thanks for showing the snake. My daughter's first comment was, "Is it for sale?" I almost never get to listen to the shows live. Need more SCs. Don't know what SCs
are. So to answer your daughter's question, the snake that we just showed you is not for sale, but we have about 65 or 70 that are for sale, and those listings will be going up on Morph Market by the end of the week, and at reptile conventions near us whenever we're tabling there.
And the snake that you just saw will probably lay a clutch of eggs around like May or June of next year. So by the end of the summer or midsummer, we should have a whole bunch of their babies that will be for sale.
But while I don't want to use the line to necessarily advertise anything else, if you're looking for a particular snake, you can always look up Epic Loot Exotics, send us a message, reach out to me or Arden, and we'll see what we got. If we got something that's perfect for you, let us know. We're doing this because we love it, but we also want these creatures that we're helping to create to have wonderful new homes.
Matt, can I say something jumping back to the previous super chat, which now I realized what SC stands for?
Please.
It's so important. I mean, it's always important to be diligent when taking in information. Think about what source it's coming from. Think about what agenda they might have. It's going to be so much more important this coming year in the United States because obviously we have a big election coming up, and there is, at the same time, swiftly advancing generative AI that can, it used to say pics or it didn't happen. Now pics aren't even going to be proof that something happened. We're going to have to be so discerning to be able to identify the fake from the real.
Yep.
And it's going to take effort. Democracy is not easy. So be prepared to be really diligent. Don't just share the link that you see that happens to agree with you. Read the article. I realize plenty of people on both sides don't do that. Nonetheless, it is very important to read what you're sharing out into the world. Think about what you're putting out into the world yourself, and be diligent. I'm going to be that white guy quoting Martin Luther King, but the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. I think it has to be bent. It has to be bent toward justice. We have to bend it that way. Thankfully, there are a lot of people working on pulling that in the direction of justice, but the more the merrier.
And our final super chat, which came in while I was saying something similar, but I love the fact that somebody can exercise some concision here. $10 from Entangled Loam. What keeps me hopeful is knowing that people who were uninvolved in the past are now personally affected by the fruits of their apathy, and some are changing their minds as a result. Hang in there. Thank you, Entangled Loam. I think that's a wonderful sentiment and a way to put a great bow on it. I'm not going to go through an end of show soliloquy or message the way I might always do, because I just kind of finished a big one about hope. Let me just say this. First of all, there are upcoming shows and events here on this network. Tomorrow, right now, the current plan is at 2 p.m. Central to start a Thanksgiving special event. We'll have more details about that when we get closer to 2 o'clock on Sunday. It's the Sunday show with myself and Forrest Valkai. Monday will be Skeptalk with Aron Ra. Tuesday, Dying Out Loud with Dave Warnock. I'll be back next Wednesday with my love, because it's Arden's birthday, and that's what we're going to do. We want to spend her birthday with y'all. And next week, it's going to be rocking, because I'm willing to take calls that we might otherwise have skipped. I'll just say it now. Next Friday, we'll set the super chat limit, the threshold, not limit. You're unlimited on super chats, but the threshold is going to go down to $5 next week. Instead of being 10. So any of you who had questions, who didn't get them in today, and you didn't have a spare $10 or whatever, you can get them in for $5 then, but also you can call in and we will be taking questions, hopefully some rapid fire questions, talking about the stuff that's on our mind. And you know what, honey, you want to make the stream a lot about snakes next week?
Hell yeah. Let's do it.
Okay. It's not just going to be an all snake show, because we're not going to take over the line to be an Epic Loot Exotics thing. But for her birthday, for us getting to show off geckos and snakes and all that wonderful, wonderful stuff, that's what we're going to do. Thanks again to the Apostate Paul for screening calls today. To all of our moderators, to all of you who called in, yes, including Stanley. I don't have any ill will towards anybody. I know people are like, oh gosh, why you be so mean to Stanley? I'm just I got a show here and I'm trying to understand what's going on. We value the community that's being built here. Don't forget about LineCon. Don't forget about going to patreon.com/dyingoutloud for Dave's Patreon, but also patreon.com/call the line. You can go to QANAline.com and apply for End Boss. We have more information about that as we wrap up the holiday season. 2024 is going to be a huge, huge year for the line. Thank you especially to Jeff Blackwell for coming in to tell us what's going on with American Atheists, to answer questions, and just to hang out, because I don't get to see you often enough. I can't tell you how happy I am that you're just right down the hall. In the meantime, everybody else, if you're starting to feel hopeless, remember what Entangled Loam said, or what I said, or whatever it is that makes you say, you know what? I could give up, but I'm not ready to yet. And if I can just find one more person to not give up alongside of me, and they can find somebody, and then we can find somebody, maybe we're not totally screwed. We'll see you tomorrow. Go ahead. You can say it as a stuff scrolls.
If you want to support our work at American Atheists, my efforts to preserve the separation of religion and government, feel free to go to atheists, atheists.org to donate.
That's right, atheistsplural.org.
We'll have that link in the description for everyone. Thank you, guys.
Everybody's going to talk all the way up until it goes off the screen and fades to black.